central Colombo, where hundreds of these student protesters are right now making their way towards President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's house. They blame the president and his whole family that won't rule this country for destroying its economy, and they want to see them removed from power. Where are you going? But there's many police. Sri Lanka, an island nation in South Asia home to 22 million people, has long been divided along ethnic lines. After emerging from a 26-year-long civil war in 2009, it became the region's fastest-growing economy and a popular tourist destination. But corruption and mismanagement by the ruling family, the Rajapaksas, followed by the pandemic and soaring inflation, have caused the country's worst-ever financial crisis.
We are presently undergoing a severe economic crisis that has profoundly impacted the lives of all Sri Lankans.
The situation has pushed Sri Lankans to their breaking point and united people from all walks of life against the Rajapaksas. After the protesters came here and faced off against riot police, they were dispersed, but they've since returned, removing the police barricades and pushing the riot police back. The Rajapaksas have created a controversial legacy during their rule for much of the last 2 decades. They first rose to power during the Civil War, when Mahinda, the eldest brother, became president in 2005, while Gotabaya was defense secretary. They were accused of committing widespread war crimes, as they crushed the rebellion by ethnic Tamil Hindu separatists. But to the majority Sinhalese Buddhist community, they were heroes for ending the war. In 2015, the Rajapaksas were voted out amid allegations that they embezzled billions into foreign bank accounts. But 4 years later, after attacks by the Islamic State killed more than 300 people, Gotabaya won the presidency, promising to restore security to the country. His presidential immunity meant corruption charges against him were dropped, and he promised to stop investigations into allegations of war crimes.
We have to move forward. We have to forget about these hanging on to the old allegations and all that.
He appointed Mahinda as his prime minister and other relatives to key cabinet positions, returning the dynasty to power. Since then, their policies have bankrupted the country. They introduced massive tax cuts, while Sri Lanka owed billions to foreign lenders. Soon after, the country's central bank went broke.
මේ ආර්ථික අර්බුදය නිසා මතුවුණු ගැටලු රාශියකින් අද ජනතාව පීඩනයට පත් වෙලා තිබෙනවා. ඒ ගැන මම කනගාටු වෙනවා.
When Sri Lanka ran out of foreign reserves in May, it became really difficult for this country to import basic goods like cooking gas, medicine, and fuel. So now what you're seeing are lines like this at gas stations all across the country where people have been waiting hours, some even days, just to fill up. What are these guys? They're pushing.
Yes, no have petrol.
They don't have any petrol.
No any petrol. No have.
Muhammad Imran, a father of 4, drives his own tuk-tuk, the 3-wheeled taxi that many Sri Lankans rely on to make a living.
දායේ සිට වගේ මේ පොලිම මිනිස්සු ගෙවල්ලලත් යන්නේ නැතුව මේ පොලිමේ ඉන්නේ. මේ පොලිම කිලෝමීටර් 4ක් මේක බලන්න බෑ මේක යනවා නම්.
What are you going to do if you can't get fuel today for your tuk-tuk?
මේ පෙට්‍රල් ටික ගාගත්තට පස්සේ තමයි මගේ ඊළඟ ස්ටෙප් එකට මම යන්න ඕනේ. මගේ දරුවා බිස්කට් පැකට් එකක් කිල්ලුවත් මට දැන් ගෙනිය ගන්න බැරි තත්ත්වයක් තියෙන්නේ. මම තව පාරක් කියන්නේ මේ තත්ත්වයට ගෙනාපු පාලකයන්ට සාප වෙන්න ඕනේ.
Even once staunch supporters of the Rajapaksas are turning against them. M.A. Mahinda is an army veteran. He lost a leg fighting under the Rajapaksas in the Civil War. Now he wants to see them go.
මොකද මේ රටේ අපි අතපය දන් දීලා බේරගත් රට යම් යුද්ධයේ මවාපාමින් ජාතිවාදයේ මවාපාමින් කෙටවීම තුළ මිනිස්සු බලනවා එයාලා ඒ යුද්ධය අවසන් කරාට පස්සේ මේ රට සෞභාග්‍යයට ගෙනියනවා කියලා මේ රට විනාශ කරා.
As you said, the politicians have divided this country. Do you think that Sri Lankans need to come together in order to fix the problems?
අපි හැමෝම එකට එක්කලා මේ රට ගොඩගන්න ප්‍රතිපත්ති සහ මේ ගොඩගන්න ක්‍රියාදාම ජාතිය වශයෙන් බෙදෙන්නේ නැතුව අපි ඔක්කොම එකතු වෙලා මේකේ ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් එක්ක.
The veterans are part of an encampment that was set up in April outside of the president's office, calling on Rajapaksa to resign. Swastika Arulingam is a human rights lawyer and activist who's become a prominent figure in the protest movement.
This is unprecedented. Several classes coming together calling for a particular regime change that can only come about if there's a deep economic crisis.
There's been this narrative that Sri Lanka's problems are all the fault of the Rajapaksas and their government. Would you say that's accurate?
The Rajapaksa government used the problems which already existed in our economic system to enrich their family. It was almost like a monarch system where you had to pay the king some money in order to get something done in the country.
So what happened that brought all these people out here to the streets to protest them?
It's this deep material crisis, the crisis of existence, which actually brought so many people to Colombo because they have nothing to lose. They're starving, they're on the streets, so what do you have to lose? So you come and push for a regime change.
But that push for change has come at a cost. In May, Rajapaksa's supporters, many bussed in from the countryside, attacked the protesters' camp, destroying their tents. In response, anti-government crowds torched properties belonging to the Rajapaksas and their allies. 9 people died in the violence. Prime Minister Mahinda and other Rajapaksas resigned, but the president stayed on as protests against him grew. They reached their peak on July 9th, when demonstrators stormed several government buildings, including the president's home and office. They even went for a dip in his pool. Imran, the tuk-tuk driver we met weeks earlier, was part of the crowd.
Very big.
It's beautiful, huh? What is this space?
ඒක තමයි ජනාධිපතිගේ රැස්වීමක් පවත්වන අවස්ථාවේදී සියලුම මේක තමයි ජනාධිපති පුටුව.
It was Gotabaya's seat.
Yeah, now it's left, no? මම මේක ඇතුළට එද්දී මම හිතුවා ඇත්තටම මේක ඇතුළට එද්දී මේක අපේ ජීවතුන් අතර ඉන්නකොට දිව්‍ය ලෝකයක් කියලා. ඒ දිව්‍ය ලෝකයේ තනි පුද්ගලයෙක් මේ දිව්‍ය ලෝකයේ ඉන්නවා කියලා අපිට හිතුවා කෝටි 2 කෝටි 20 ලක්ෂක ජනතාව දුක් විඳින රටක මේ නිවස අපි ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී මා ජනතාව ලබාගත්තා කියලා තමයි මම හිතන්නේ.
The occupations of his home and office forced President Rajapaksa to flee the country. From exile in Singapore, he submitted his resignation, leaving parliament, which is still controlled by the Rajapaksa's political party, in charge of deciding a successor. Premnath Dolawate began as a lawyer for the Rajapaksas and now represents their party in parliament. When you learned that he fled the country, how did you feel?
Now I felt very sorry for him. I think if these violent people had catched him, definitely it will be like Libya.
So is that why you think he fled the country? Because he was scared for his life?
Yes, of course. I'm ashamed of our people.
There's a lot of people in this country who say that Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled because he was escaping prosecution for his crimes, like corruption.
No.
What do you say? What do you say?
Oh, no, I don't agree because anybody can be accused for any accusation. It should be proved until they prove guilty, they are innocent.
But do Mahinda or Gotabaya Rajapaksa or their immediate relatives, do they have millions in overseas accounts?
I'm not aware.
You're not aware?
I'm not aware.
You're their lawyer. No, no one is probably better aware than you.
No, I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Even if allies of the Rajapaksas are adamant there's no proof of wrongdoing, economists say that as long as people feel their leaders are corrupt, it will be hard to get the country back on track.
We'll have to make a lot of hard choices, a lot of choices that are politically unpopular.
What kinds of things are we talking
So
about?
to start with, we'll have to significantly increase the taxes. I tell people, if you want to fix the country, you need to pay tax. And then the answer I get very often is that if I pay taxes, Rajapaksas, all these politicians will steal our money.
They're going to fatten their pockets with
Yes. So there has to be some action taken against these people who are engaged in corruption so that people have more faith in the system.
Despite the urgent need to restore confidence, on July 20th, Parliament held an emergency vote and elected as president Ranil Wickremesinghe, a six-time prime minister and ally of the Rajapaksas.
මගේ ජීවිතයේ තියෙන මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුව. එහෙනම් මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ මට දැන් මේ ගෞරවය ලබා දීම ගැනත් මම විශේෂයෙන්ම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා.
While the ruling party patted themselves on the back, demonstrators were furious. They see Wickremesinghe as a continuation of the regime they'd hoped to topple and a leader who won't tolerate dissent.
They represent only themselves. We know that it isn't too far away before there is more violence against those of us who are here. Aragaleta! Aragaleta!
That violence came hours after Wickremesinghe was sworn in. Under the cover of darkness, the new president ordered security forces to beat back protesters from his office. Police stopped us from getting to the scene, but we managed to get through to an activist who was still there.
They are hitting very badly, very aggressively.
Why do you think the police and the army are doing this now?
Because of Ranil need to show his power. He's famous for doing this. We are trying our level best to protect our motherland. So that's what we are doing.
Are you going to stay there?
I will not be able to continue the conversation. They are attacking us.
More than 50 protesters were injured that night, and the next morning, riot police lined the streets. Arulingam and the other activists were still coming to terms with how far their movement had come, only to find themselves back where they started. Colombo this morning looks a lot different than it did yesterday.
We expected Ranil Wickremesinghe to crack down on protesters, but we did not expect him to act so quickly within 24 hours of him taking oaths.
How do you feel looking back at the last 100 days and where you've ended up now today?
It's like we take 10 steps forward and then we fall 20 steps behind. We have called Parliament to not vote him into power as the president, and they did the exact opposite. The issue at stake here is democracy, and without democracy, we cannot come out of this economic crisis. If we don't go for a general election right now, this economic crisis will continue, this instability will continue, and more people are going to go into further and further desperation, and more people are going to die.